Welcome, everybody, to Congregation L'Dor Va-Dor's Touch of Torah, our rational Torah study for the upcoming Shabbat's Torah Parsha. And tonight we have Exodus, TERUMAH, which means gifts, and it is February 21st, 2023. I turn it over to Rabbi Barry Silver to share his viewpoints, his insight, and his rational discourse on the Torah. Thank you, Rabbi.
I wasn't sure if you're going to say rational or radical, but sometimes a little of both. By the way, you may know what the word radical means. It means to go back to the roots. So we go back to the very roots of Judaism. It's related to the word radish, which is actually a root, or radio, in which sound waves are emitted from a central source, from the roots. So we do have a radical approach sometimes. It's always a rational approach. And if it's not, call me out on it, because we invite critique and criticism and challenge from all sides. That's how we arrive at truth among human beings. This passage, it's kind of devoid of anything spiritual. It's all about the physical construction of the tabernacle. So it tells you what the dimensions are, what different things are made out of, how to construct it, and choosing artisans to do it. It's not really that inspiring, except for one line that makes up for all the rest. And it's an essential line in the entire Torah, I would say. And the line goes like this: Asuli Mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. Normally, that is translated, you might have heard the word Mikdash, like Beit Mikdash. It's related to the word Kodesh, Kiddush, Kaddish. Mikdash means holiness. Asuli Mikdash means make me a place of holiness, or a synagogue, or a tabernacle. V'shachanti b'tocham. Now, I recently gave a talk at Company A, and they're very intellectual Jewish professionals. You can only join by being invited. And one of them said to me, "Rabbi, I don't speak Hebrew, so I feel lost in a synagogue. Do you translate?" So I said, "Oh yeah, we translate what we do." So he showed up Friday night. Said, "I love the service. I love the rational approach, but there were some songs you didn't translate when you marched the Torah around." And I said, "Okay, I apologize. I thought I was translating everything, but I didn't translate those." There is a lot to say for being able to know Hebrew and what the words mean. The translation doesn't always do the trick. And that's why it takes some time to explain the word, because every word has a story. And if you know the story behind the word, your understanding of the concept is better. So, Asuli Mikdash, make me a holy place, related to all the other words for holy, meaning sacred, special, set apart. V'shachanti b'tocham. Shachanti is related, it's the verb form for a noun, shechina. Some of you may know that word. Shechina means a divine presence, or God's Holy Spirit, and it's feminine. God is often depicted as masculine. He's a tough warrior called he, and he sometimes gets a little militant. But Shekhinah is a way of looking at God it's a feminine word, and it means a holy presence. So the word Shachanti means, and I will dwell, b'tocham. But when it says the word I will dwell, it connotes this holy presence will dwell. B'tocham is always translated in any translation I've ever seen, among them. B'toch means among, and cham is them. So build me a sanctuary, and I will dwell among them. It's always translated that way, except when it gets to me, I have a different way of translating, which is equally authentic. B'toch means among, and it also means within. So the normal concept of God is that God is way up here, as a supernatural being, and you build a sanctuary, and his presence will be in the sanctuary, and therefore when you come to the sanctuary, you will be with God. Obviously, the religious authorities want to translate it that way because they want to encourage people to come to the sanctuary, but there's another way of translating, and I will dwell within them, not among them. In other words, inside of us, there will be a Holy Spirit. Asuli Mikdash could also mean not make me a tabernacle. It could also mean make me holy, or find a holy presence in the world, and I will dwell within you. I kind of like that translation better, because I think the whole point, the highest ideal of Judaism, is to feel spirituality within us, not outside of us. And so this passage, Asuli Mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, reminds us that in Judaism, at least according to this method of translation, which I say is equally as authentic, Judaism believes that we have a divine spark within us. We're made in a holy image. And the concept of holiness or godliness has been evolving since time immemorial. The rest of the passage is filled with things that are of no real consequence. It's talking about the linens and the materials and the copper and the gold and the nightstand and all this stuff. And I tend to ignore all of that, other than to suggest that the Jews supposedly left Egypt as slaves. And once they're in the desert, they are commanded to bring all of these different things, crimson and different colored yarn and different forms of metal gadgets to put things together and to construct the sanctuary, and royal robes. And it's just boggles the mind to think that they had all these things that they took with them as they left Egypt. Like, where would they get all these things from? They were slaves. So the passage clearly is not one that is historically accurate. But I would say what is accurate is that if we see the holiness around us, a divine spirit, a sacred feeling, a presence, a divine presence, can be felt within us, and it can be transmitted to other people. That, I think, is the quintessential part of the story. And I'll also conclude by just describing quintessential. I don't know if you're familiar with the word, but most people know what it means. It means the essence. But it comes from Greek. Quint is fifth essence. The fifth essence is quintessential, because the Greeks, like other primitive people, believed that all the universe was comprised of 4 elements. There was wind or air and water, and then there was fire, and then there was earth. These were the 4 elements, and they thought that everything in the world was a combination of these elements. They were kind of on the right track in that we now know that there are tiny elements called atoms, and they make up everything in the world, but they thought there were 4. There's actually a lot more, and it's a little more complicated. So you have 4 elements that make up everything, but then it talks about the quint essence, the 5th element. What could that possibly be? It's the soul, or the ideal form of that particular thing, or the quintessence. So I would say that the quintessence of this passage is that we can have holiness and a divine spark. Well, not that we can, we have it. We just don't always recognize it, but we need to construct a life that's holy, and then we can feel their presence. I'll leave it at that. As I say, there's not much else in the passage. I think that's enough, but I'll take any questions or comments or disagreements with my analysis of the passage. Sharon, did you go ahead?
Yeah, I know there was a passage, Rabbi, that they asked for these gifts, for people to bring all these gifts, and then they had to say, stop, enough gifts, stop, too much already. Is this the passage?
If it was, I would have mentioned that, because that's also very significant.
Okay.
But you're on the right track, because it's a passage that talks about the need to give terumah. Terumah literally means to raise up, because when you give of yourself, you're raising yourself to a higher level. And you're exactly right. there's another passage a little later on where it talks about giving terumah, and the people gave so much. I consider this, I think my dad coined it. He said, that's one of the greatest miracles of the Torah, that the people gave too much and the leaders had to say, okay, stop giving. We have too much already. That comes up later on.
And then the other thing
else?
I wanted to say is that you mentioned Shekhinah, and that our women's group or women's club of L'Dor Va-Dor is now called the Women of Shekhinah. So we all believe that there's a spark within us that can be part of L'Dor Va-Dor, part of all the women and men, and just vibrate that spark around us.
Well,
So
Sharon,
that
you're right. My
essence.
bad. My bad. I should have remembered that our group is called Shekhinah. It's kind of a new name that they came up with. So yeah, I definitely should remember that. So Shekhinah is a beautiful name. It's the female aspect of the divine within us and around us. So, and I do encourage people to join, because one person practicing Judaism can do okay. But to really practice Judaism correctly, you have to do it in a group. It's a group effort. It's not just individual. So come out and join Shekhinah, join our men's group also, which is called the Ezekiel Club, I believe. Come out and join us, and you'll really get the most out of Judaism. Anybody else want to share a comment? By the way, there is one person on this line, and I got this from a discussion that we had prior to getting onto this Zoom discussion, who wrote me an email or two, and I neglected to respond. I do have an excuse, not necessarily a good one, but I've been running around to various medical appointments, and also I have some legal stuff that were time deadlined that I actually have to finish tonight. When we get off of here, I have to finish it, and then I have responses to emails that are coming. So if that applies to you, you'll be getting a response, probably not tonight, because I'll be working late into the night on this, but the next, probably tomorrow. I will tell you something that's kind of fascinating about this this case that I'm working on. I'm putting the complaint together, and it's a pet malpractice case, and they have a very short statute of limitations. If you don't file within that time, you're done. You can never sue. So, as you probably know, animals in the legal system have no rights, and people just figure, well, how would an animal have any rights? And so we do have laws protecting animals from abuse, but it's not because the animal has a right. It's because it was seen to drag society down. It would affect human society if we became callous. The animal has no right to file a lawsuit or to appear in court. Most people think that would be ridiculous. So animals have no rights. But what's amazing is that animals did have rights in the Bible 3,000 years ago. In the Torah, where it has the 10 Commandments, it said the animals are entitled to a day of rest. They have a right to a day of rest. And the rainbow is seen as a covenant after the flood, not between God and human beings, between God and all living things. To have a covenant means you have two legal entities. You can't have a covenant if there's just one legal entity. So a covenant with all living things means that God is a legal entity, and all living things are legal entities entitled to the rights of this covenant, this guarantee. And so you have animal rights in the Torah 3,000 years ago, and no animal rights in American law, or probably any other legal system that I've heard of. So some crazy attorneys like me, we file animal rights lawsuits, and we're like knocking at the door saying, okay, I get it. Okay, an animal doesn't have the same rights. I should say a non-human animal doesn't have the same rights as a human being. I can live with that. But don't tell me what our law says, that a dog is like a chair or a chattel, and that in the eyes of the law, a dog is nothing more than a chair. So for instance, if you buy a chair and somebody takes a hammer to it and destroys it, the law says, okay, what'd you pay for the chair? All right, I paid $50. All right, how long ago? 3 years ago. All right, so with depreciation, your chair is worth $20. So if you went to court in a civil matter and you won, you would be entitled to $20. Okay, who's going to do that? Nobody. So if a dog is chattel, they ask, okay, what did you pay for the dog? Paid a few $100s. Well, that was a long time ago. What's it worth now? It's probably worth less. And then you'd file a lawsuit and for pet malpractice, which is very, very difficult and very expensive. And you get maybe a few $100s if you're lucky, if you win. Or if the dog was a rescue, you get nothing. So the law is ridiculous. It's got to be somewhere between chattel and human being. So we animal rights attorneys, not many of us, but we're knocking at the door saying this is wrong. So I'm filing a lawsuit now, and it's going to list the dog that was a victim of really bad vet malpractice as the plaintiff. Not the owners as plaintiffs on behalf of the dog, which they will be because they suffered too. They've suffered pain, loss, separation, and emotional distress. I'm suing on behalf of the dog as a plaintiff. Now, the legal system in Florida and elsewhere would just like laugh this out of court and say this is unheard of, it's unprecedented. But here's the thing, and I'm letting you know for the first time, the other side's going to find out. When you go, well, in the law, a parent is entitled to sue on behalf of the child. Okay, so if a child is injured or damaged or suffers a wrong or dies, let's just say, forget dies, but let's say the child is injured. A child is not what we call sui juris. A child does not have legal standing. A child cannot go into court. It can only go to court by having a parent or someone in loco parentis in place of the parent, like a guardian, appointed, and then they go to court and they can get damages for the child, held in trust for the child. All right, so the parents of a child can sue, and the child is the plaintiff, and they're suing on behalf of the plaintiff. Well, the defendant, the veterinarian, in their literature, I asked my client, go through all the literature. In the literature, it says, it refers to the dog as the parents, as the child of their parents, the owners. So now I have the vet admitting that the owners are not just owners, they're parents. Yeah. And therefore they have the right as parents to sue on behalf of their child. And the veterinarian can't deny it because they've just admitted it in their literature. And I'm very excited about filing this lawsuit and seeing what they're going to do. The other thing I've used this, well, there's different ways of doing it, but I've used this successfully also, is to suggest that the veterinarian, when I sue them, they respond by saying, well, the dog's chattel. The dog's just a thing. It's not a member of the family or anything. It's not a sentient being. It's a thing. So then I say, well, if the dog's a thing, why don't you call yourself a pet repairman instead of a doctor? Why do you refer to a place as a hospital instead of a repair shop? Obviously, and why don't you tell people when they bring them in, we consider your dog a chattel, not a member of the family? Is that really what you tell them? So it's going to be an interesting case. And after, I expect to have it done tonight, the complaint, and then I will respond. And I do apologize to anyone who's getting a late response. Anybody else want to share some thoughts about this? Or
yeah, I think Valerie wanted to say something, but right on what you were just saying, Rabbi, every year you have to pay for, you have to get a rabies certificate for the state of Florida, probably any state. And I just got a card a couple of days ago, and right on it from the state of Florida, animal, whatever it's called, it says pet parent right on that card from the state of Florida.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's great. Thanks for letting me know. That's what it says.
Yeah, I mean, so it's not just his paperwork. We're pet parents, so okay.
Can you send that to me?
I can copy it. I'll take a picture and I'll send it to you.
That'd be awesome. Thank you very much. That could be very helpful.
Okay.
Anybody else? Valerie?
Well, I almost forgot what I was going to say, but that's very true, that when you take your animal in and you get treated, when they bring the animal back out to you, they always say, oh, here's your mommy. Oh, here's your dad.
Right.
To us in that regard, and even in the medical release forms, it says parent of. It does refer to the pet parents. So you do, I think, have legal precedence in that situation. I think you do have a valid point, to be very honest. Getting back to where we started from the beginning, you were talking about the quint or the soul from within. to me, that's a throwback even in our United States history. The Indians felt that everything had a soul. Mother Earth, every flower, every tree, every plant, even the rocks was sentient beings, had a soul, had a being, had an internal mechanism that made it lifelike, godlike. So that's really a throwback to Indian culture, American, I think, because they've always talked about Mother Earth.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think a lot of cultures, especially indigenous cultures, and Judaism was indigenous at one time, have that belief that there's some soul within, right, all the things, right, all the things and rocks and everything else. That's exactly right.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
Well, let's say you file that dog lawsuit, and you get a judge who doesn't like dogs. Well, I mean, is there a risk for you as filing a frivolous lawsuit?
That's a very, very good question. That's a very good question. Yes. Attorneys can get burned badly because there's a thin line, and it's up to the judge to determine, is this guy on the cutting edge of establishing new law, or is this guy filing something frivolous? And usually there's no good way of determining that, and it's up to the judge. And you're exactly right, Stanley. You get a judge who would think, this is amazing, I'm going to rule in his favor, or this is nonsense, I'm going to clobber him for attorney's fees. I've had that happen. The most notorious case I had happen was I filed a lawsuit against Jews for Jesus, and the judge hated the case. He was Jewish, but he thought Jews would be accused of being anti-Christian, I suppose. So anyway, he tossed it out and said it was frivolous. I appealed all the way to the Florida Supreme Court and won. The Florida Supreme Court reversed him and said, not only is it not frivolous, it's valid law that I was suing under. And the judge was so upset and angry that in the course of the next year or so, he sanctioned me repeatedly for saying unpleasant things about Jews for Jesus. Never once did anybody say anything I said wasn't true. Never once did they say that I didn't need to say this because of the lawsuit. I had to explain why Jews would be offended by someone lying about them and saying they belong to Jews for Jesus. The fines after I won in the Supreme Court were so outrageous that I couldn't continue anymore. It was well over $100,000.
Wow.
And I could not afford, because when you go after an attorney, they can collect against an attorney. An average person can hide their assets. An attorney can't. If you have a judgment against you that hasn't been collected, they can disbar you. It's well over $100,000. We were probably going to win the case, but he's just fining me all over the place. And I said to the client, it was all pro bono, that I can't do it. It was the most difficult decision I ever had to make. Because I had them dead.
It sounds to me, Rabbi Barry, like you needed a good attorney, because I would go after the judge.
I tried. I believe me, everything that could have been done was done. Yeah. Motions were filed to disqualify that. Everything was done. But every time I did something, it would cost me tens of thousands of dollars more money. And I didn't have the judge, as you may know, the judge is an absolute ruler. They can do whatever they want. And if you try to challenge it, the appellate courts usually back them up. And I had kids that I was supporting, and I just couldn't do that. But I did go to other Jewish groups. None of them came to my defense at all. They just said, best of luck. We're with you in spirit, but that was it. But yeah, the judge, as you say, the judge could.
Don't you think at that point there is a valid point for not having unlimited judge appointed for life? Because they're omnipotent. I don't believe that. When you give somebody unsanctioned,
unfettered discretion,
yes, authority, they become megalomaniacs. They become godlike. And I feel very, very strongly that Supreme Court down should never be lifetime appointments.
I agree with you. Not everyone will do that, but certainly some of them will, and the temptation is there to do that. And so I agree with you. It's very, very dangerous to have lifetime appointments.
Absolute power gets absolute power corrupts.
Absolutely. That's right. Thank you.
Well,
And
the Supreme Court just ruled today, again, with surveillance, allowing it to go on. There was just a ruling, the same thing. So I agree with Valerie. I mean, lifetime appointments are really outrageous. People need to be, again, my thing is people need to be held accountable.
yeah,
And,
can we also say this, that if a president openly brags about abusing women on radio, and
Right.
then when the accusers come forward, he denies it and slanders them, can we all agree that such a person should not be able to appoint people in the Supreme Court who are going to codify his abuse of women into law on the highest court in the land, which is going to materialize into anti-abortion stuff? I mean, can we not agree that that person is not qualified to put people for life on the court? I mean, it's ridiculous the way we have judges and our legal system is messed up. And I could be sanctioned right now for challenging the legal system because an attorney in Florida has an obligation under the Florida bar to uphold respect for the law. And saying something like I'm saying, well, the law is flawed, or you can get into serious trouble doing that. And it's actually, they could sanction me for it. I've never cared, and I've never been sanctioned, but I easily could be. Anybody else?
I'll see you in court.
I'll see you in court. Well, I do want to mention a couple of things. One is I think as Sharon, I guess she didn't mention it once we went live, but we're gearing up for some Passover observance. I'm not sure exactly what, but we'll keep you posted. Purim's coming up, so we'll be talking about a rational view of Purim. And we got other organizations in the community that are interested in us, especially after the very successful event where we attended the Now Luncheon. And some of the pro-choice community and others are interested in working with us. There's a rally for Ukraine. I've been asked to speak at that in conjunction with a 1-year anniversary, which was, I think, yesterday. It's coming up in a little bit. We'll put something on the website about it. So check out the website. You'll see what's going on. And we have a lot of things happening in the community. And if you're involved with a community event or you know of it, and you think that it's something that we'd be interested in, let us know. And we can help support it.
Rabbi, the rally is Friday, and it is February 24th at 5 p.m., and it is on our website.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. Yes,